Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink. Episode 51. We hit 50, which is weird. This is brought to you by our incredible local friends in Waggle Golf, 9 Mile Brewing, and Barrel Theory Beer Company. No Joe Smith this week. He'll be in the interview here with Scott Wheeler, who I know, honestly, outside of our interviews with Russo Recurring and Zeev Buium, highest viewed episode to date is the previous one with Scott Wheeler around the NHL draft. So you're welcome. But to fill in, I brought in Spoked Z of Boston, of Minnesota, of Sweden, of the last drop, so we could get some prospect talk and random nonsense per usual from us. Z, appreciate you taking the time, buddy.
Big fan of the show. Third time, long time listener, third time participant.
Matt's hard.
I don't know. Whatever, dude. This is always fun. It's just very different than Judd's Buds, which is just kind of like chaos from start to finish.
Like we actually have design topics to get into. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I'm like thinking. I'm like, okay, where do I put my hands? Like, what do I do with my hands?
I think this week for Judd's Buds, we spent the first 8, 9, 10 minutes talking about pizza and the Super Bowl. So if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know, everyone go subscribe to Judd's Buds. But yeah, we got a full episode here, even without Joe. We're going to start with a little bit of Gopher hockey talk per usual, but expand a little bit more to just greater college hockey. Then we're giving you another incredible interview sitting down with Scott Wheeler talking about the second ranked Minnesota Wild prospect pool. Then we're going to talk a little bit Minnesota Wild prospects, maybe sprinkle in a little bit of NHL draft prospects, and wrap things up with hot takes like we do every week, brought to you by our great friends at Barrel Theory Beer Company. See, let's talk bigger picture Gophers. I know you came out here, obviously, as everyone saw on socials, came out for the Michigan State weekend back in December, saw a lot of things from both teams, but generally speaking, like, what is the outsider's view of the Gophers this year? Like, is this a team that you think has more warts that we've seen recently and might be a scary team to bet on making the Frozen Four? Or is this one of those top 4 teams you're like, I don't see how they don't make it?
I mean, it's tough because, like, I would say probably 10 to 12 games in, my answer would have been completely different. But like you said, like the last couple of weeks specifically, there have been like some of those big time worry warts. There you go. We have just like some like defensive lapses in their game recently. Like the Michigan State one was a big outlier. And there have been a few weekends, again, I would say probably since I was out in Minnesota, where it's been like one really solid game and then one where it's like they kind of took the night off. But I mean, this past weekend, or well, I guess it was not this past weekend, 2 weekends ago, the Wisconsin series, they were really good. Like there was 2 big time games they really needed, especially after that Michigan State 9-3 pounding and then the 3-3 tie or whatever. But like they came out with a big response with a 5-2 win and a 4-1 win against Wisconsin back to back. Wisconsin, I think, is a really weird team to me, but I still think, just looking at big picture, like I would be confident with them making that Frozen Four. Like I really like how many different line combinations they can throw out. And especially when they went down with like half of their roster out, the fact that like, did they win every game? No, but like they compete hard. They give you a little bit of everything. And plus, like, I just love Brody Zeemer, so I'm always going to be super high on the Gophers in general. But like, I thought their last 2 games against Wisconsin was the big time statement wins. Like they dominated. But it's interesting too. Look at some of the teams that are like, I think, were they 4th now in the country with Western Michigan right in front of them, and then Maine behind them, I think, in 5th overall.
Maine or Denver sitting there at 5-6, I'm pretty sure. And I think pairwise Gophers might even be 3, but by voting they're 4.
Yeah, that's it. Because I mean, like right behind them, it's Maine, Denver, Providence, Ohio State, and BU. Like I still have the Gophers, I think, to be honest with you, like in a different tier. Western Michigan's fascinating. Like they are a team, and like they can put up big time offensive numbers, and they play hard, and they are not fun to play. Because obviously that barn is nuts too. That doesn't really factor in the as far as like the Frozen Four goes, but like, but I'm still confident in Minnesota, especially if they can like just stay healthy. And like Snuggerud's really taken off after a quiet start to the season. He's kind of on a bit of a tear right now. He gets going and he plays like Hobie level. Like that is that's an X factor times 10. So, but yeah, no, I still am super high on the Gophers. Again, like, yeah, the last few weeks we've seen some warts that we maybe didn't see the first 10, 12 games, but I just think like how many different line combinations they can throw out on a given night and still like score at will, seemingly. I'm still confident in that team. They're so fun to watch too when they're really going and that barn's rocking. Oh my god, was it the Michigan series?
Dude, Wisconsin is the loudest I've ever heard it.
Yeah. Sorry,
that was insane, nuts, dude.
That part was nuts. Man,
not. And it's crazy too. After that game, the player for Wisconsin like trying to go with the fans, like, dude, what are you doing?
The fact that there were that many different incredible camera angles. I wasn't even mad at what's his face on Wisconsin. Like, that's so funny. Thank you for giving us this moment.
I wasn't mad. I was surprised.
Yeah, I was like, all right, that's a bold move. But again, thank you for giving us. Thank you for giving us this moment. There was like someone from right up top. There was someone from like behind, and he was just getting carved. Where you can see the people working in the game too. Like, oh my god, it was so funny. Oh, it was great.
Yeah, definitely. Gotta ask then. I mean, unanimous right now on the USCHO polls. Boston College #1. You see them a lot more than a lot of our listeners. Like, it's obviously not the easiest to catch East Coast hockey if you're out here in Minnesota. How does Minnesota stack up against a BC in your mind? Like, are they in the same tier with like a little nudge to BC, or is BC like a rung above the Gophers at this point, in your opinion?
I don't know if like throwing out like a full on, like they're definitely, I wouldn't say they're on like a different level, but like especially right now, like the last 5 or 6 games, BC has been, I mean, like what Ryan Leonard, Gabe Perreault, and like some of those big dogs, like Hagens has really started to take off recently too. I mean, he's been good the whole time, but he's had a few games where he like took over. Like they just can kill you in so like all 4 lines are ridiculously high end offense. Like Dean Letourneau, first round pick for BC, I think he plays like maybe 6 minutes a game, and he's just like running around, like killing guys. And then they pretty much use him like defensively, but like every once in a while you see his skill come out. Like a guy like Teddy Stiga since the World Juniors has been a beast too. Like they are just a terrifyingly good team. And then in net, they're unbelievable. Like it's one of those teams where it's just like game in, game out, you're like looking for a weakness and it's just tough to find one. Like it's almost at the point where when I'm watching them, I'm like, the one criticism I have is like, I feel like, I don't know, the guys on the 3rd and 4th line can't really play a ton. Like can't play enough because like what Ryan Leonard is doing is terrifying. Like Gabe Perreault is like a cheat code. But like they just like legitimately have no glaring weaknesses. So it's just like you're just trying to search for ice time for some of these guys. And they are playing insane hockey right now. And I should have pulled up the score. They're playing the Beanpot right now against BU. Oh. That has not been a close tournament. I think BU won by 6. So I think BC won by 7 last week. But they just score at will. It's like it's fun.
0-0, barely into the first as we record here on Monday night.
Nail biter.
Nail biter.
But again, I still think Minnesota though. It's that team. Like Minnesota does have that lineup where it's just like, again, they still have 4 lines that can hurt you. They can score. Then like obviously a guy like Sam Rinzel has been a beast too, like on the back end. So he gives you a little bit of both ends of the ice. So I would, again, like I never, especially because it's college hockey, you can never just be like, oh, for sure thing, this team's on this level. Once you get in like the top 6 or 7 teams, it's like everyone's right there.
And it's all single elimination that completely
exactly.
changes things. And I mean, it's probably too simple to say this, but it's twofold for me, for the Gophers. Does goaltending hold up? Which, like, so far they've given us reason to believe, but it's still like you've seen every goalie either falter or completely carry their team. And then discipline, because like there are times where the Gophers get really heated, and at times it works in their favor. Like, dude, Brody Zeemer, who we both love, and like you watch the switch flip for him every time. He's like, I'm going to kill people. And it elevates his game. It channels him in a different way when things aren't going the right way offensively. But there's other guys that, like, you can tell, like, players get under their skin. They do stupid things. You can't afford to make those kind of decisions come postseason. But I think they're right in the mix, at least as it sits right now. But two more topics here before we transition over to the Scott Wheeler interview. First one, and this is more of a rapid fire type concept, but there's a lot of guys that are like fringe decision on do they stay with the Gophers or do they leave, right? So rapid fire, tell me, are they here next year or do they go to their NHL team? And I'll give you a softball to start. Jimmy Snuggerud.
See ya. Next question.
Next question.
How good has he been though, dude? Like,
he's been
it's
so
crazy. Yep. Like the first however many was like honestly like 10 games in, we were like, I mean, he's still putting the points up, but we haven't really seen a game where he's like taking over. Even like the games against Michigan State that we both were there for, he had moments.
Moments is the key.
He looked like he was hesitating with the puck, but like the last couple of weeks, he was just like, no, give me that pill. Like, release like 12 shots a game.
Nope. This is the year that justifies him continuing to come back. And I don't see any way. Like, you know, God willing, they're in St. Louis. He's packing the biggest suitcase of anyone on the team, and he's not leaving.
Yeah.
Hopefully he likes deep fried ravioli. All right. Ryan Chesley.
Where do
you can pass? This isn't very rapid fire.
One more year. Actually, I don't know. He's like ready to go though. Where is he? New Jersey?
No.
Chesley? Oh yeah, that was dumb. No, I'll just not that. I mean, we've already lost the rapid fire part. I'll just say he's back for one more year.
Okay, sure. Sam Rinzel.
Gone.
Yeah, I agree. Sadly.
Yeah.
If, as a Wild supporter, if you could have Snuggerud not be with the Blues or Rinzel not be with the Blackhawks, which one would you ask for? That's a toughie.
I think like Rinzel not being with the Black, like I like just the last 2 years of their drafting has made me furious. Like it's sickening. It's sickening.
Let's stay on that path. Oliver Moore.
I think I would say he's back. Like,
that's where I sit right now.
It's one of those ones where it's like, if you tell me he is gone, I'm like, all right. At the same time, I actually think it's the right decision for him to do one more year, to be honest with you. Just given where he's going to, like, I think he would be better served playing college hockey one more year. Again, he's like an undersized center. I mean, just one of the best skaters that we've seen in a long time. Like, he is so fun to watch. Again, another guy that I always say, like, I would pay to watch him bag skate. Like, he's one of those guys. But, like, I would love to just see a consistent season of him taking over games offensively a little bit. Because it's, again, he's another guy that we see flashes. And it's like, there it is. Like, that's in your wheelhouse to pull off more than, like, once every couple of games. Because, like, he's another guy, like, when he does have, like, that moment, it's like, oh, there's the first round draft pick that we all knew was there. But in like on one of these rosters where you have guys like Snuggerud, Matthew Wood, it's always going to be tough. Like his style of game in general, sometimes it'll be tough for him to like pop up. Like recently, he's been real good too. What's he, 4th, 5th on the team in points now?
I don't know.
5th. There you go.
There you go. All right, we got 3 more because there's a lot that we could hit. There's a couple that I kind of lean towards staying, but Connor Kurth's an interesting one. Does he join Tampa or not?
No, I'd probably say he comes back. Tampa's a weird one too, where like
knowing that I'm pretty sure they lose his rights if he doesn't go.
Oh, that's right. No, I forgot. He's got the yeah.
Same with Chesley too, and that's why I'm pretty sure Chesley will leave.
Yeah. I forgot Chesley was that old, honestly.
Now I don't know for this next one. I don't know if he's got one more year or not, but I also just don't know how they view him because he started the year awesome, and lately maybe there's a little bit more to be desired from the game. Kind of like Snuggerud light. Like when he shows up, he fucking shows up, but when he doesn't, like he's just kind of there. Brody Lamb, New York Rangers.
Let's see, this is his 2nd year?
He's a junior.
He's a junior.
But I'm pretty sure he came in true freshman.
Yeah, I think he did. I would lean stay.
Okay.
I feel like, again, another guy that would be like better served. Again, like, just a little bit more consistency for a full season. I mean, he's not, I don't think, like you said, I don't remember where his rights are. Was drafted in 2021. Yeah. Rangers pick. Yeah. I mean, especially with where the Rangers are at in general, probably better for him to play one more year.
Here's the one that's really interesting to me. And my opinion has completely changed since like the day I found out he'd play here. Matthew Wood. Is he a Nashville Predator next year or even this spring?
That's another one too that we've definitely seen. Like, I feel like his ups and downs have been like, because when he's not on, it is, maybe it's just because he's just, every time I see him play hockey, he grows like 6 inches, I'm pretty sure. So maybe that's why it just stands out every time he does a great game or a bad game. I mean, at this point, he's played 3 years college hockey. He's probably going to go to Nashville next year. But like,
I don't know. I'm holding out hope. I think he'll come back again. He is so happy here.
That was the thing. He seems like he's loving it.
Dude, but that sit down for the interview, like he even talking to him after, he loves being here. He's like, this place rocks. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah. And especially like this year, given the whole thing with like the World Juniors and then like an injury, like he hasn't really been able to like, because again, it felt like the start of the year he was adjusting to that line. It was a fun line combo to start the year. And he still was putting up points, and he was like almost looking for a spot. Yeah, great bit. And then he got comfortable, and like there were a few games he was just going off, and then the whole World Juniors thing, like I felt like really was a giant speed bump. And again, like it was funny when he came back for that second game against Michigan, say that we watched live. I was like, he's gonna go off because he's pissed off, and I mean, it was just a tough one. So again, if he hadn't already played 3 years of college hockey, like honestly, he
came in early. In fairness.
Oh yeah, he came in before like going into his draft year. He was a freshman at UConn. So maybe that factors in too, but I don't know. It feels like, you know what? I'm gonna go stay.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Right. Then last thing here, I asked you this earlier in the year. I feel like there's a way more solidified answer, and I feel like we'll both probably be mostly aligned. Dream Frozen Four this year in St. Louis. What are the 4 teams for the best Frozen Four or most enjoyable for you? And if it's just a bean pot repeat, I'm disappointed based on how things went this year.
No. I would like BC, Minnesota. I'm trying to decide if I really feel like going. Denver.
And
I really want to go say Western Michigan, to be honest with you, because it's
oh,
just
okay.
so fun. Like I just want them, those lunatics, and say
Totally fair. To be honest, if I have to get Western Michigan in, I'm even gonna say BC gets upset because I need Zeev Buium and Charlie Stramo both playing there while the Gophers are there, and then whether it's BC, Western Michigan, Maine, like any of them can filter in as number 4, and I'm pretty okay. BC would be cool just because like it would feel weird to win it without BC have been a part. Like if they lose in the semis and then the Gophers beat whoever beat BC, I'm okay with that. But for BC to not even make it there, it would feel like I'm going to be just as excited if the Gophers somehow win it, but like it would feel better if they were part of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we got to have all of the Wild prospects. So Gabe Perreault, there we go.
He is.
Sorry, Alex Micheletti.
You know who's been ridiculously good? I mean, they've been good all year, but like they have had a couple big time wins. This series this weekend was incredible with Arizona State, dude. My God, are they playing some fun hockey, dude? And that was it was Denver, both OT games this weekend. High scoring, like 1,000 miles an hour. That is a fun college hockey team. I love watching them play. Cullen Potter 2025 draft.
Dude, but what if UNLV sneaks into the tournament? What's Denver going to do then?
That's true.
People forget. All right, we won't waste your guys' time anymore. With that, let's kick it over to draft prospect guru, Scott Wheeler. This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it. That makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today, making his second appearance, national reporter with The Athletic, covering NHL draft prospects. Welcome back, Scott Wheeler.
Thanks for having me, fellas. It's you're catching me at the tail end of my month from hell, so I'm happy to be through the fog and out the other side, and now I get to turn my attention to the 2025 NHL draft and sort of pivot away from the prospect pool rankings. So proud of the work, but happy to be done with it. It's a grind.
So just like small glimpse, don't have to go into all the detail, but what's the month of hell look like for Scott Wheeler?
Yeah, so the process for the prospect pool rankings really starts in November. I put together loose lists in November before I head off to selection camps for the World Juniors, try to get a bit of a head start on at least building out the top 15 for all 32 teams. I put it in a giant Google sheet for our editors, and then I start to rank the teams from 32 to 1. And then right in between selection camp for the World Juniors and the World Juniors themselves, that sort of week in December, right before Christmas that I have free, I try to get 4 or 5 or 6 of the 32 pool rankings written so that when I come back from the World Juniors, I don't have to write 32 of them in 32 days kind of thing. And I can give myself a bit of a cushion and a bit of a head start. Our editors also like to have them a few days early at the Athletic so that they can get them all ready. But it's from as soon as I get back from the World Juniors on January 6th every year, from January 6th through till today, February 7th, today's the last day, obviously, as we record this, it's every single day. Like it's literally 30 straight days of writing, no weekends. I don't see much of my wife and my kids. It's a grind. It's a ton of writing, obviously. Like you could fill a couple of books with the actual word count of the project. They're all about 5,000, 6,000 words each. But on top of that, it's video, it's conversations with scouts, it's conversations with their coaches and their general managers and their junior clubs and their pro teams in Europe and their coaches with their college teams. And it's really just making sure that I've got it right. And then right before it runs, I'll send it to a scout from within each organization and say, hey, is there anything in the list that really pops out at you as off? And if there is, maybe I'll revisit that ranking, or maybe I'll hold firm in where I'm at. But typically the message back is no, maybe a couple of minor tweaks here or there, but you're good to go. And then from that point, it's on to the next one.
So if anyone listening thought that Scott Wheeler just puts these lists together willy-nilly, clearly not the case. A lot goes into this, and I'm glad you came out the other side okay. Let's go to more of a sore subject quick. We all know how the fans feel. We've seen it on social media, but from Hockey Canada brass, from you and your colleagues, The Athletic, like, what's the general sentiment around just the current state of Hockey Canada after back-to-back World Juniors quarterfinal exits?
Well, I think they had a bit of a reckoning this year in Ottawa. It was interesting. Scott Salmon, the head of the program of excellence at Hockey Canada, did 2 press conferences. He did one in the day immediately after the tournament, the day after the tournament, with his head scout and his general manager, Pete Anholt and Al Murray. Obviously, Al Murray's a name that Joe would know from his Tampa days. He won a Stanley Cup with the Tampa Bay Lightning. In that presser, it felt like they hadn't really wrapped their head around how badly things had gone and some of the real issues that they'd had with their process, some of the selection in terms of players, but also the way that the team was operated and run and coached. And from top to bottom, I think they still hadn't really come to terms with what went wrong and how badly it went wrong. And then oddly enough, Scott Salmon, the very next day, sitting with Catherine Henderson, the new CEO of Hockey Canada, did a second presser, and in that presser took a lot more accountability. And I think after sitting on it and sitting on the way that they talked about the tournament in their first presser, he sort of came back around and said, look, this wasn't a tournament of what ifs, and we could have won it. I think there were some real flaws here with the way that we constructed the team. And so now it's on them heading into next year to make sure that they get it right, because they will have a stronger team. The Americans, after winning their first ever back-to-back golds, are expected to take a step back. They're going to be particularly thin down the middle after James Haggins. James Haggins will be back and will be their number 1 center at next year's tournament. But it is a bit of a weaker age group the next couple of years for USA Hockey than it has been the last couple of years. And so there's no excuses for Hockey Canada. They talked in the lead up to last year's tournament, talked a lot about how they were more prepared, how they'd returned to the World Junior Summer Showcase in Plymouth, how they'd named their coaching staff early, how they knew this age group better than any of the previous age groups when they'd had disappointing tournaments. And yet clearly they didn't know the age group, or maybe they knew the age group a little bit too well and they'd made up their mind on some of the wrong guys. So all of that sort of made this concoction. Then they weren't practicing, and it took them too long to get guys into the right spots on the power play, and everything was just kind of out of whack for this Hockey Canada sort of team, if you will, maybe even more so than they were the year prior in Gothenburg, which I thought was a disaster in and of itself in Gothenburg. So now you cannot have it happen. It's unacceptable to have it happen twice, but it would be incomprehensible if Canada were to flame out for a 3rd straight tournament next year. So now the pressure's on them to get it right. And they hinted at, we needed to bring more skill guys. We've got the most talented players. We should have the most talented team every year. And we've sort of I think they realized that they'd maybe shot themselves in the foot or handicapped themselves a little bit by trying to build too much of a roster built around penalty killers and energy guys and that kind of thing. Canada can dominate at this level just by bringing the most talented players. So I think we'll see, they're still going to bring role guys every year, but I think we'll see a little bit of a pendulum back the other direction towards some of the skill next year.
And you mentioned USA taking a step back, which is natural after winning back-to-back, gold medals. The guys can't stay there forever, right? A lot of key core pieces leaving that team. David Carl won't be coaching that team, so you have a new head coach and that kind of situation. But even if they take a step back, the tournament will be in Minnesota next year.
Yep.
Just what are the realistic chances? What do I have to go right for them to be a third straight, if that's even possible?
Well, the big losses are the Boston College kids, other than James Hagens, right? Like Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard will not be on the top line as their top line wingers in next year's tournament. Danny Nelson, who was a really important player for them, won't be back. Oliver Moore, who's been a really important player in back-to-back World Juniors for them, won't be back. So you start to look at, okay, who's next? And they still will be a top team. They're going to have the advantage of playing on home ice, all of that. Cole Hudson was one of the best defensemen, best players, period, at this year's tournament, and is eligible to return as a returnee. James Hagens should be one of, if not the best player at next year's tournament. James Hagens should be in the conversation for MVP of next year's tournament, I think. So there is still more there. There's more coming. You're going to have Brody Zeemer back. You're going to have Max Plante back. There are some really strong pieces still of that team, of that age group. Cole Eiserman will be back. Trevor Connolly will be back. They're still going to have plenty of skill. I think the biggest question for them will actually potentially be in net. They trusted Trey Augustine and really relied on Trey Augustine in the last couple of tournaments. Even this year, their backup, Hampton Slukinski, is a legit high-end prospect. And neither of those kids, due to age, will be back at next year's tournament. So you start to look ahead to who the goalies could be. And it's likely going to be Nick Kempf, I think is probably the front runner. He was the guy at the program for them. He's played well for them internationally. But Nick Kempf is not Trey Augustine, and he's not Spencer Knight, and he's not Hampton Slukinski, and he's not Dustin Wolf. Some of the goalies that they've had come through the program at the U20 level have been high-end types over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So they'll be a little bit weaker there. And then you start to wonder, who are the centers after James Hagens? And it's not a great group. I think you'll see potentially some wingers move to the middle. I could see a player like Teddy Stiga, who obviously scored the golden goal for them at this year's tournament. Teddy isn't a natural center, but I could see a player like him or Brody Zeemer potentially being asked to play center. Because there's not a lot there. This year's age group at the program is a really weak one. So the kids who are about to get drafted, who will be potential 18-year-olds for next year's team, aren't high-end types. They like LJ Mooney, they like William Moore, they like Cole McKinney, but those aren't top World Junior players, especially as 18-year-olds. So it'll be interesting to see how they fill out their roster. But still, with Cole Hudson, we'll see about Zeev Buium. I would expect that Zeev Buium's playing in the NHL and isn't a part of it, but technically Zeev would be eligible to return next year. But even without Zeev, Cole Hudson, James Hagens, Cole Eiserman, Trevor Connolly, like those are going to be among the most skilled players in the tournament. So they should absolutely be in the mix for gold or in the mix for a medal next year. No question.
For sure. And we've got a lot of, Gopher following here. So kicking off some of the 2025 draft talk, got to ask you, especially since, I don't think I would want to ask Corey Pronman what he thinks about LJ Mooney. But you might give us a little bit more favorable read. Like, what do you see from him? I know he's been in and out of the lineup, but do you think this is a guy that's looking at first, second round, or is he going to drop further just because of his size?
Well, the day after this podcast released, my next top 64 list for the upcoming draft will be released at the Athletic. And I have LJ as a late second still. I thought his ranking through NHL Central Scouting, I think he was like 201st or something in North America. I thought that was insulting, frankly. And I know in talking to some people at the program that they also thought it was insulting relative to some of the players on their own team at the program who were ranked in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s kind of thing. I still think he gets picked. The challenge with LJ is obviously the size. He just hasn't gotten bigger. People were hoping that he was going to get bigger. He comes from a family of people who are all honestly on the shorter side. He's obviously cousins with Logan Cooley, and even Logan only got to sort of 5'10", 5'10.5". But very, very good player at this level, I think, is the important piece to remember. He has played center and the wing for them. They've kind of moved him a little bit more to the wing this season as he hasn't been fully healthy, and the wing is sort of an easier route for him to get back into the mix. But he was a very good center for them as an underager who was called up to play at U18 Worlds last year. I think he'll be potentially one of the centers for Team USA as an 18-year-old at next year's World Juniors. excellent skater. Like, he's one of the best skaters in the draft, tons of skill, plays with detail, supports the puck well. But you see him in real life and you run into him around the rink, and he is every bit as small as his listing, and not just small in height, but he's a skinny kid who looks like a baby a little bit. So the hope for me is, if you're drafting him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, which I think is probably the range that he belongs, though he may go in the 6th or 7th round. If you're drafting him in the middle rounds, the hope is that if he can even get to 5'9" and 175 pounds, then you might have a player, or at the very least, he'll be a good AHLer because of how he skates and his ability to make plays and how detail-oriented he is and how well-rounded he is. And then on top of that, he can play center and he can play the wing. Will he get out-muscled in the face-off circle? All those things are going to have to sort themselves out over time. And he's going to be a 4-year college player, I would expect, and sort of really work on adding muscle and getting stronger in the gym and that kind of thing in college. But I'm a big fan of LJ. I love the way he plays. And certainly at this stage, like, he's a top player in this age group. That doesn't mean he's a top prospect for the NHL in this age group. But when you see him on the ice with his peers, like, he's normally one of the better players on the ice.
Very fair. Okay. So quick hit then, just more holistic, early lookings for the whole draft class. We kind of do something on our prospect show, adjacent here on the network, called Judd's Buds. Our guy Spoke Z. He does a way too early rankings, which is somewhere between August and October. Then after World Juniors, we do the kind of early rankings, and then we'll kind of trickle it in throughout up to the draft.
Yep.
He kind of gave 2 tiers for the top 10. He's got 4 guys that, like, kind of interchangeable, but he's got them ranked. And then the 5 through 10, also kind of another tier, but he's got them in his order. I just want to see if anything stands out to you as being, like, way off or something you'd interject on. So his top 4, he's got Schaefer, Hagens, Misa, Martone.
Yep.
Do you think there's anyone else that deserves to be in the conversation for that top 4 current state, or is that pretty much the solidified group?
Well, there are 2 sort of players at the fringes of that are interesting. One is Caleb Desnoyers, who teams now view as a top 5 guy, and many teams view in the same conversation, not with Schaefer, but with the 3 forwards after Schaefer. There are a lot of teams that would make a case that Caleb Desnoyers is every bit as strong an NHL prospect as those kids are. I have Caleb 5th on my upcoming list, so Caleb is sort of one spot below that group of 4 that you just mentioned. I think those, in Misa and Hagens' case, they're just better skaters. They're more skilled. They're more prolific offensively. There's just more power play upside and that kind of a thing. But Desnoyers is a 6'1.5" center who's been one of the best players on one of the best teams in the CHL this season, and is debatably one of the 2 or 3 best players in the QMJHL this season as a draft eligible. He's a very well-rounded player. The belief is that he's going to be an excellent 2-way second line center in the NHL. And that may have more value than a winger, for example, even if a winger is playing on the first line kind of thing. Like, if he's an all situations, penalty kill, power play, 5-on-5, 6'1" center, 2-way type who's still productive, that's a very valuable player. So Desnoyers in that mix. And then the other one who won't go in that mix because of the injury question, but coming into this season, there were some who believed that Roger McQueen of the Brandon Wheat Kings belonged in that group. Now McQueen is dealing with a back issue that has bothered him really for 2 years now, since early on in his last season entering the draft. And he hasn't played a lot of hockey this season. He's been out since he had a very, very strong start despite dealing with the back injury in the WHL, and then decided to shut it down and get healthy and try to get the back sorted rather than playing through it. But he's kind of the X factor, because he might not even be a top 10 pick if there are still questions about his draft. And if he can't get back in time to play some more hockey, and he's going to be a topic of conversation, a lot like Caden Lindstrom, who obviously is still dealing with his back issue, but the Columbus Blue Jackets decided to take 4th overall in last year's draft regardless. McQueen kind of fits into that same range. Had he been healthy, I think McQueen would have been potentially right there with those kids. He's a 6'5", 6'6" center with a ton of skill and a pretty rare makeup. So those are kind of the two wild cards are Desnoyers and McQueen. But I do still think that 4 is the clear 4 at the moment.
Okay. No, that's very fair. And do you have something, John? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, I know you mentioned you're wrapping up the rankings and everything like that. The Wild number 2, only team in the playoff team with the top 5. What stood out to you looking at this overall class? It kind of surprises maybe people that they have this kind of class, considering the picks they haven't had top 10 ones in a while. Just what stands up to make out of this group, and maybe what kept them from being number one in your mind?
Well, I think I've talked about a little bit about it with you offline, but I think the big thing that kept them from being number one was that Jesper has had a tough year. I think if Wallstedt had continued to progress and had a really solid year in the AHL and had a .915 save percentage and was making stops and keeping them in games and that kind of a thing, I think that could have potentially put them sort of more firmly in the first overall, or in the number one slot, if you will, for this year's prospect pool rankings. I still, as you guys both know, if you've followed my work, I'm still a big believer in Wallstedt. I like a lot of what I see in Wallstedt. I do think over the course of the last couple of years, there have emerged at least some question marks about his speed in the net and his mobility. And he's a little bit of a heavier guy, and his fitness and that kind of a thing. I don't think he's the quickest goalie, but outside of the quickness piece of it, and maybe him needing to get into a little bit better shape, Wallstedt's a very, very technically sound goalie. He's got good hands. He covers the lower third of the net with his pads well. He gets up and down in his butterfly fine. He plays sharp angles, really sort of technically high-end goalie in that way. And has always, I used to refer to him as kind of like a robot goalie. Like he was just always in the right spots and just made the saves. And now you've started to see it break down a little bit more when he needs to play quicker and be quicker post to post in the net and on scrambles and that kind of a thing. But I do still think he gets there. I do still think he's going to be a very good NHL goalie. The track record is still really strong, but that was kind of maybe the one thing that's holding them back, because otherwise, with the addition of Jiricek, you've now got two of the top young D prospects in the sport, plus Brock Faber, who obviously is nowhere close to being a factor for this list anymore. But Brock Faber is a young core piece of that blue line. Part of it is in terms of them being number two, is that I'm a huge believer in Zeev. I think Zeev is, and my top by now, my top 100 prospect pool ranking will be out at the Athletic. So I can say that Zeev was number two on that list. Right behind Ivan Demidov as in terms of the top 100 NHL prospects. So just a big believer in Zeev. I think Zeev's going to be a star in the NHL. I think he's going to take over on that first power play from Brock Faber and be a stud, a guy who plays 25 minutes a night and has 60 points in the NHL in a season kind of thing. Like I do think that's the caliber of player that we're potentially talking about here. I think Jiricek's got a chance to be a really strong piece for them if he can sort out the footwork and the mobility and sort of work on his skating a little bit more. Yurov is a legit player, and the move from wing last season to center for Yurov has sort of really changed his projection for me. Obviously had a brilliant season last year at center in the KHL, has been a little bit less productive this season, but looks like he's going to be a second line center now. And that's a big deal for the Wild. So big believer in Yurov. I like Ogren. I like Kuznetsov. Charlie Stramel has taken a step this year after reuniting with Adam Nightingale, his head coach previously from the NTDP, and making the transfer from Wisconsin. I think that's been really important. There's some other guys sort of a little further down, Ryder Ritchie and others, who I think have a chance. But that's the core of their group. I still think Riley Height's got a real good opportunity to be a solid NHL player and a power play 2 guy and that kind of a thing. So a lot to like about their pool, but it starts with Zeev and Jiricek and Yurov, and maybe Wallstedt if he can sort of reestablish himself. I know Iowa isn't a strong team defensively in front of Wallstedt, so I think the numbers are at least partly to do with that. But they weren't a great team in front of him defensively last year in Iowa either, and he was better last year than he's been this year. So Wallstedt's kind of the X factor of the group, but I really like Yurov and Zeev and Jiricek, and then obviously they've already got Ogren and Kuznetsov playing in the NHL and sort of finding their way as well.
Nice. And you mentioned before, like, very thorough process where you kind of want to check yourself before you post anything. When you went to the Wild and others, like, were there any that they had to check you on? Like, were there any big changes you made at the end?
No, not on the Wild pool. I went to the Wild about this last week, and sort of no comments back from them, honestly, about this list in terms of the 1 to 15. I also asked them about some of the guys that I'd left off. So Ryan O'Rourke wasn't on the list. Jack Pert wasn't on the list. Caden Bankier wasn't on the list. Callum Parker wasn't on the list. Rasmus Kumpalainen, who signed, wasn't on the list. Sebastian Soini, who they took in the 4th round in last year's draft and is a top player in the Finnish age group that he's a part of, wasn't on the list. So I sort of sanity checked all of that past them. Aaron Pionk was sort of the last guy on my list. So I sort of asked them, would you have Bankier over Pionk and that kind of a thing? And the answer was that I sort of had it in the right spot. So Bankier was the one who was kind of that. If the list went to 16, I think Bankier, Caden would have been the next player. I've got time for Kumpalainen, but he's really slow, and I've never been able to wrap my head around that. Very well-rounded center. He's got size, but he's really, really slow. So Kumpalainen, I think if he can work on the footwork and the pace of his game, could be a fourth-line center in the NHL potentially someday, in which case he belongs on the list, but I'm just not sold on him getting there and getting sort of into better shape and getting a little bit quicker. And then O'Rourke is another one that just feels... At this point, I think Ryan O'Rourke's probably tops out as a number 8, number 9 defenseman. Like he's probably more of just a call-up guy rather than an everyday guy.
What do you think of Bankier overall? I know you mentioned number 16, but is he a guy? Like, what do you think about his game, and do you think he can play bottom of 6 NHL?
Yeah, I think he's got a chance to. I had a lot of time for him when he was in the WHL. He obviously was a surprise inclusion on the Canadian World Junior team a couple of years ago and had a really nice run there where he became a 90-point guy in the WHL, and he got signed and he played for Canada at the World Juniors, and he just seemed to be on a really strong path. He hasn't been able to make the same kind of impact at the AHL level as he did at the junior level. He's never been the strongest skater. It's something I've talked with him about over the years and something that I think he's aware that he needs to work on. He's also, despite being a fairly tall kid, isn't the biggest or strongest kid. So he doesn't kind of fit that natural checker role, but he hasn't scored enough in the AHL to get promoted as kind of a power play 2 guy or a middle 6 guy. And so I think he's kind of caught in that little bit of an in-between, but he's a well-rounded player. He can play all 3 forward positions. Coaches have always seemed to trust him. He does have some scoring, like he's got a good shot and he's got some skill. I think the question with Bankier has always just been, what is he in the NHL? Like, can he be a third line guy? And is a coach going to want him as the kind of player that they fit onto a fourth line? He's not really that sort of physical, overpowering forechecking type, but he's also not maybe a skill guy. And so he kind of always fit into that in between. Could he play at 5-on-5 in the NHL in a game tomorrow and hold his own? I think absolutely. But I do wonder whether he just kind of becomes a 13th, 14th, 15th forward kind of thing.
Okay. And there's a couple guys on here that I think Wild fans will be very pleasantly surprised with. Some still just don't know what to make of Juracek. So him up at 3 is awesome. Charlie Stramel, obviously resurgent year. Aaron Pionk, especially on the back half of, since the holidays, he's looked awesome. The one guy that I see on here that I feel like fans are either going to push back on or be worried that they've fallen off. What can you tell us about Hunter Haight? Is this more indicative of other players rising, or has he shown you things this year that make you hesitant?
No, I actually think Hunter's had a really solid first season at the pro level in the AHL. He's been a very respectable player for them. He spent time on both of their special teams. He's played at center and stuck around at center. I think Hunter's had a solid season. I actually think what downgraded Hunter for me was actually last year. I had a conversation with Haight entering last season and the staff in Saginaw, and their goal for him entering last season in the OHL was for him to be a 100-point player in that league. And he finished as a 60-something point player in that league. Now, they were very deep. They went out and acquired Owen Beck at the deadline. They had Matthias Sapovaliv down the middle. They had 3 of the top centers in the OHL last year. And so it became a little bit harder for Haight to be the guy and to be the number 1 power play guy and to hit that 90 to 100 point range in his final season in the OHL. He was still a very good player for them. He was an important part of a team that won the Memorial Cup for them. There's a lot to like about Haight and the junior career that he ended up having, especially after the trade to Saginaw, which sort of rejuvenated him after he had a very tough time post-draft in Barrie, sort of trying to take a step. The challenge with Haight is skates well, good skill, smart player, well-rounded player, but he's a 5'10.5", 5'11" center, and the skill has never popped. He's never been a top offensive player in his age group or a really sort of star offensive player at any level he's played at. And so what is he as a 5'10.5", 5'11" center if all of his tools are good but not great? I've got a lot of time for him. Everybody who's ever coached him has had a lot of time for him. I know the Minnesota Wild have a lot of time for him. but I think ultimately it's going to be hard for him to carve out a niche as a full-time NHLer. Will Hunter Height play games in the NHL? I think he will. Is he going to be an 82 game player, or is he the kind of guy who plays 30 games for you a year and then is in the AHL the rest of the time kind of thing? I think that's what they have to figure out. And it's going to be challenging for him with Kuznetsov and some of the other young players that they're also trying to incorporate. And once Yurov comes over, there's another roster spot, another guy who's ahead of Hunter Height on the totem pole. It might be a little tricky for him to earn minutes with them at the NHL level, I think.
And as you follow the Wild for a long time, you've noticed that the center position has been an intriguing and frustrating one for them for their whole existence, basically. And I still wonder if they do have a true number one center on their roster right now. Like, Rossi's been great the last couple of years. He's really done everything they've asked him to do. Eric Sinek, obviously a valuable two-way player. That's where Yurov to me comes in. And I know you mentioned probably a second line center in the NHL. Maybe their number one center comes from free agency with all the money they're going to have, but where do you see that dynamic?
Maybe you can win with 3 second line centers, right? Like, maybe that's the path for them.
No, very much too. Like, you just think of other guys in their division, like McKinnon, and you look in the West with McDavid, and everybody has that guy that, playoff time, right? Who's going to match up other than the blue line, which will be great. But so you see Yurov logically probably is more of like a second line guy, second line center, versus being like the alpha number one kind of thing eventually.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of Yurov is that he played left wing and right wing all the way up. So maybe he's a second line center or a first line winger, right? Like, maybe he makes the move back to the wing, even though his best hockey, I believe, has been played at the best hockey of his career has been in the last 2 years, and especially last year. And he played it entirely at center. So I do think center really works for Yurov. He's an incredibly smart player. He understands where to be on the ice and how to use time and space to his advantage. He can play with a variety of line mates. But the beauty of Yurov is that maybe he is that guy, like Leon Draisaitl's is an entirely different monster, but Leon has often played on the first line wing with Connor McDavid when they've needed to. And then he's been their second line center at other times. And he's been their first line center. And they've kind of had 2 first line centers in Ottawa. Very different situation here, but maybe Yurov can elevate and play on your first line on the wing when you need him to. And then he can be a second line center type when you need him to. Maybe he gets to first line center status. I do think that would be a bit of a surprising outcome. Like, I think he's more likely a second line center than a first line center. I think he's more likely a 50 to 60 point player than a 70, 80 point player. But would it be completely out of the question for him to have a season like that at some point in his career? Could he be a 50 point guy every year and then have a season or two where he's a 70 point guy with the right line mates? I think that's possible for Danila. I think he's going to be a heck of a player and surprise some people. And I think had they been a part of the World Juniors over the last few years, and had we been able to see more of him internationally in a best on best setting, I think there would be a lot more excitement in North America about who Danila Yurov is as a prospect.
Very fair. Joe, do you have anything else, or did we want to wrap on the final question?
I was going to ask about Kuznetsov, because he's on your list. Obviously, he's an NHL player, could probably be on or off it. And I'm sure you don't watch them every day, but the last 4 or 5, 6 games, he's really started to come on and like be a little more of a force, like, aggressive, offensively, physical. And I think I agree with you in your write up, where there are times I thought he could be in Iowa and it could benefit him. Right. Yeah. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not, but where do you see him as a player, and like, is this kind of what his role probably will be in the NHL as far as like fourth line, third line center, or is there more upside there than, I know fans are always like, you should move him up. I'm like, well, there's other guys ahead of him, and like maybe he fits better because he's playing that role minutes.
I think ideally he becomes a really productive 40-point third line center. I don't think he's a fourth line center long term. I think he's more talented than that. I think he's smarter than that. The work ethic has always been there. He's always sort of earned the trust of his coaches. He plays hard. He's a smart player. I don't think the skill is high end. Like, I don't think you'll ever see him on PP1 kind of thing. But could he become a PP2 guy who contributes regularly at 5-on-5 and is an important part of a winning team? Absolutely. Could he become a $3.5-4 million player in the NHL who's a solid third line center? Absolutely. So I think that's what you have to be working towards and building towards with Murad, is sort of elevating him eventually at the right time, elevating him from sort of fourth line usage and playing 10 minutes a night to eventually playing 14, 15 and a half minutes a night. I think that's the path for him.
You kind of have Stramel in a third line center role too, right? You have Stramel kind of in that similar, different players, but you have in the similar like slot probably.
Yeah, and if Stramel ends up as a fourth line center, I think that's a good outcome for him as well. Not all of these guys need to be playing high in a lineup for them to be having an impact. If he becomes an excellent fourth line center, even as a first round pick, I think that's a respectable outcome that you can live with. So, and he looks very different than Kuznetsov. So if that's your 3-4C of the future, they offer something completely different. Stramel's, they call him the big rig. Like he's just a big boy. He's heavier over pucks. He's got that size and strength to him. Kuznetsov relies more on his know-how and his smarts and right place, right time and work ethic and that kind of a thing. But I think that could be the solid foundation of something. Now, is that it? Let's say it's Yurov or Rossi, and then Kuznetsov, and then Stramel, and that's the future. Is there a path for all of those guys to be a part of the team when they're all going to remain fairly young for the next few years? Are they going to want to spend money elsewhere? Where does Joel Eriksson Ek fit into it? Are they going to spend money in free agency once Suter and Parise fully come off the books? All of those things are things that they're going to grapple with. The cap's going up. There's going to be money to spend. And as a result, not all of those guys are going to play. Riley Heidt is also a center. We have to remember, right? Like it's not all of these guys are going to make it, and that's okay. But I think most of them feel like they're on the right path. And obviously in Kuznetsov and Ogren's case, they're already starting to contribute.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that can go up this way, but you've been really bullish on Z, which I've watched him a lot. I think, that'll be, I don't know if it's him in favor going forward or how they mix that pairings up, but I don't know if he can have the same impact that maybe Faber did right away. Maybe they're different kind of players. I don't know if you see that. Like maybe kind of unfair to expect him to come in and be right in the playoffs and then next year be Faber.
I try to always temper my expectations and not get carried away. And I try not to fuel the fire with fans, but I truly believe that Zeev's ready to come in and contribute this spring once his season at Denver's over and play in the playoffs and be a good player right away. Now, is he going to play 30 minutes like Brock Faber did as a rookie? Probably not, but no, I can't remember the last time a defenseman other than Brock Faber, and although Lane Hudson has played some pretty ridiculous minutes this year. But even like Aaron Ekblad wasn't playing those minutes. Rasmus Dahlin wasn't playing those minutes. Owen Power did right away play 24, 25 minutes a night in Buffalo. But I could Zeev Buium next year play 20 minutes a night for them and then you've got Faber playing 26, 27 and Zeev slots in immediately on your second pairing and immediately on one of your two power plays. I absolutely think he's capable of being that kind of a player right away.
Fans are going to take that and run. Oh, that's awesome. Well, really appreciate the time, Scott. Final question. I know we already did your Waggle Golf foursome, but different spin on it this week. Everyone go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10, take 10% off your entire order. Hats, polos, quarter zips, you name it. Get over there. I'm going to let you choose one of two paths. We're either going to go with Athletic employees or Wild prospects. You're going to put together a list of 4 that would make the best golf foursome just on talent.
Oh, the best golf foursome. I've played golf with a few people at the Athletic, actually, in Traverse City a couple of years ago. A few of us went out. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the golf game looks like in terms of any of the prospects, really. I'll go for what would be a fun foursome from Athletic colleagues on the course. I've played a lot of golf with Dom. We played together in Toronto here over the summer a few times and had a ton of fun out on the course with Dom. So I'll throw Dom in there. I'll throw my good friend Haley Salvian in there. Haley's a really good pal of mine, and we've been friends for a long time. So I'll throw her into the mix. And then I've heard that Jesse Granger went out with Ian Mendez and a couple of colleagues in Vegas at the draft this year. And word through the grapevine was that Jesse pounds it 300 yards and can absolutely really smack the golf ball. So I'll throw Jesse in there. If we're playing best ball, maybe Granger can carry us.
Okay. I like that. Is there anyone you want to throw under the bus? This is someone that should not be anywhere near this list.
No. I've played with Boltman a little bit. Boltman's a fine golfer. Nobody. I played with Shapiro's no longer a colleague, but I've played golf with Sean Shapiro, former athletic colleague, and nobody I need to throw under the bus.
Okay, fair enough. Just have to offer it. It's a good list. We like it. And appreciate you coming on a second time. Hopefully there'll be more. I know there'll be plenty to talk about around draft time. You're always welcome back on. I mean, as a recurring guest, you're kind of obligated to just come whenever we throw the bat signal now, but really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Get some rest now that the month from hell is over, at least for another couple of weeks before the draft prep gets going. So
yeah, I got to finish up this draft ranking, and then my wife and I are actually headed down to Scottsdale at the beginning of March to play some golf and get some time away. It'll be our first trip with no kids, so we're looking forward to sort of both celebrating our 30th birthdays this year, and we're gonna head down to Scottsdale for 5 or 6 days. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, enjoy it, man. Have a lot of time, have a lot of fun, and thanks again for joining us and talking prospects and everything. So appreciate it.
Yep. Cheers, guys.
All right, Z. We heard from Scott Wheeler. Obviously, he said some pretty horrible things about your opinion on prospects. Whatever, we can get over it. We can be adults about this, but no, seriously, everything he talked about, because you have listened to it. Anything glaring that either got your attention, oh, I didn't think about that, or I disagree, what popped up specifically? We'll talk first about Minnesota Wild prospects.
No, I mean, again, we talked about this before we jumped on, but it was funny. There are a few times where just given the fact that this is what he does for a living, and sometimes I'm trying to figure out how exactly to say the thing that I'm watching. I can't vocalize it. The Rasmus Kumpalainen part, legitimately, for anyone that's listened to Judd's Buds before and talked about or listened to the way we talk about the prospects and stuff, I was yes, the fact that he was I can't figure him out because he is so slow, but what a player. I'm thank you, dude. It's insane. He goes half a mile an hour and he still gets through the neutral zone into the offensive zone, establishes possession, super smart player, really good defensively. He's a great player. The foot speed is going to be a big roadblock for him to get to the NHL. So it was just funny, the fact that he literally was I just haven't been able to gauge. I forget how he worded it exactly, but I was I said that. Thank you. I feel justified.
Is the foot speed fixable in your mind? Is that something he can work on and make a difference, or we just got to deal with it?
I mean, maybe marginal speed, but again, it's literally the speed. It's not just the skating in general, because he is a very agile. He's light on his feet as far as how well he moves east west, but the north south game isn't there. And especially when you look at how Minnesota likes to play, realistically, they like to play at pace, especially on that fourth line. We talked about what the role that Lauko was going to play when he came in. We know how fast Uzadinov is. They like having that 100 miles an hour north-south game in their bottom six, and Kumpalainen doesn't fit that, but he is just such a smart player. He's got ridiculous skill, and he's a really solid defensive forward.
And for me too, it's you can't have two Kumpalainens on a line, but if you've got two speedy guys with a Kumpalainen, you can make it work as long as everyone understands how they fit into that. But yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how he develops. Again, a reasonable swing in the draft where if we shuffle things around, I guess I don't know what order we're putting him in anymore between Mil and Kumpalainen, but you're not mad getting those three guys in the first two rounds. I'm going to just go down Wheeler's top 15 list, and you stop me when there's a moment where you don't have to say oh, screw him, this is wrong, but more where you would raise your hand and be I don't know. Number 1, Zeev Buium, who was number 2 in his entire list, which is awesome, behind Z, your draft crush, Ivan Demidov. Number 2, Danila Yurov. Number 3, David Juracek. Number 4, Jesper Wallstedt. Which, do you remember Isha throwing an absolute temper tantrum when I put Wallstedt at 3 or 4 in our summer rankings. Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
Shut your mouth. Isha, please don't edit that out. Thank you.
Keep it in.
Number 5, Liam Ogren. Number 6, Riley Heidt. Number 7, Marat Huznadinov. Number 8, Charlie Stramel. Oh, wait, were you going to stop me?
Well, so like having Huznadinov there again, I don't even know if he really counts as a prospect, but like in the interview too, it was interesting
Borderline.
listening to him and Joe both talk about like, yeah, we've talked about this before offline. Like there have been times this year where it's like he probably would be benefiting playing the AHL. But then obviously like we've seen what he's been doing the last like 6-7 games or whatever, and it's like there's that offensive player. And like, dude, that game against Montreal, oh my god, like I forget who he put in a spin cycle and just broke their ankles. Then he like lined up Hudson, which was funny, and just like obliterated him. I was like, oh my god, this was like his second to last year in ska version of Huznadinov that we've been seeing. That's like comfortable with the puck and looking to make plays. Again, I think he's third, fourth line guy in general, but like we're seeing the offensive upside. But Huznadinov slotting in there specifically is like, I guess where not necessarily it's like disagreement. It's more so just like what value you're putting.
How are you making these evaluations?
Right. Where it's like, hey, is this based on like, I think he is going to be a full-time NHL player versus like, hey, what's the upside there? So I think again, like Huznadinov to me screams like third, fourth line, center, wing, doesn't matter. He can play again, another guy in this pool that can play all 3-4 positions. Probably like maxes out at like 35, maybe 40 points, 45 points, like maybe like a half a point per game guy. So that's where it just gets like interesting where you like put value into, or like when you're ranking the prospect pool in general. It's like, again, I don't even know if we can even.
Is it how guaranteed are they to be in any? Right. Is it how high can they ascend? Is it how
it's like floor versus it's the whole floor versus ceiling thing, right? So that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, totally. So okay, for you then, however you want to twist the rationale, who would be your number 7? We got 1 through 6, and I feel like we're all pretty comfortable with that order. In fact, I might even quabble 5 versus 6, but that's just like we probably won't know until Riley Height's here.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of just like cemented in time because, dude, if he could have played for the Gophers this year, I would have done horrible things to make that date move up. But who's your 7?
I might put Hunter Haight there, which by the way, that was another
like that.
It was another funny part where like even Scott was starting to say Hunter Haight, and I was like,
yeah,
he has the. I was like, one of us.
He kept on saying height. I'm like, oh yes, people are going to be so confused, and I love this.
They might get irrational.
Anthony LaPanta is going to point back at this and be like, "See, it's not just me."
Yeah. But it's funny though, like again, like his explanation when he did get to Hunter Haight, like where he put him, like it was all reason. Like it's fascinating because like you see the flashes of the skill like since he was like his draft year, and since then it's just like he's always found himself in these situations. Like in Saginaw, they load up at the deadline and go out and win the Mem Cup, and he's asked to play like a middle six like complimentary role. So, you know who else was Michael Lisa, who is now like just ripping apart the OHL, but like
who might play for the Gophers.
It's interesting too, like coming into that year, like we talked about it on here, like we talked about it, like watching him at like dev camp too, like he might go out and rip up the OHL. Obviously it doesn't start great in Barrie, and then he moves over to Saginaw and it's better, but like he's always just been, you're just like wanting to see more because there's flashes of that skill. You see the upside, it's just not consistent, or like a guy that's taking over games. And again, the big concern is like, hey, can he be like a scoring winger? Because then he's probably got more upside as far as like, can he be a guy that like you can plug into that top 6? Again, like I don't think we've seen consistency to the point where you can like have confidence that it's like he can drive a line.
Do you feel like he's second liner bust almost? Like I don't see Hunter Haight being a first liner, but also I don't know for sure yet. I could be proven wrong, but I don't know if he fits like the traditional third line identity. He's he's very stapled at that second line. And it's like he's either going to fit perfectly or he's going to be trade fodder.
Right. And it's the thing, too. It's like technically he's a center. He's a 5'10" guy that's like, he's got really good details. Again, he can skate really well. He's got great hands. We just haven't seen him really like consistently show that he can be someone that drives your offense game in, game out. So like if he can like be a third line scoring winger, I think there's still a path there. But like that's the other thing with the prospect pool in general. There are so many players that like that it's in their bag to do that. But like it might be a situation where it's like we have a lot of players, a lot of prospects and young players who you can like plug in when needed. And it's the same thing when we talk about guys like Yurov. Like, do you really want to pencil him as like a out and out number one center? Probably not. Like a lot would have to go right for him to like for that to be a possibility, or like to be that like an outcome. But you do have a group of players in your pool and young players already in Minnesota that can get it done by committee.
Yeah,
at a level that like there are probably. I don't really know if there are any other like franchises that can say that like is a diverse prospect pool with like a ton of guys that maybe you pencil in as like, yes, there's like the Zeev Buiums who projects to be like the top of like the very top of their position. But like a lot of guys that it's like, yeah, they might be like the next rung.
A lot of guys fighting for the same spot.
Well, they do it by committee. And again, if you set, as long as you like lock up Kaprizov for 8 years, that like he's good at whatever line he's on, he's driving that offense anyway. Like whether it's a center, like that's where like it's like you'll also lock Rossi up at that point because you don't need him to be a number one seed, but he can play with Kaprizov and like he's gonna score. But like Hunter Hayden, that's what's interesting with him. Honestly, like I could say the same thing about Riley Heidt, where it's like I still don't know when he gets to the NHL. I don't know if he's going to play center. Like, will he be better served, like playing outside and just like playmaking wing?
Right.
But yeah.
No, it'll be interesting. Well, let's round it out. So 7, Susan Adinov, 8, Charlie Stramel, 9, Ryder Ritchie, 10, Aaron Kiviharu, best fucking steal that Bill Guerin's ever had. 11, David Spacek. 12, Mikey Milne. He's probably next week. Our interview's dropping with him. Awesome guy. Very excited for y'all to listen to that. 13, Carson Lambos. 14, Hunter Haight. 15, Aaron Pionk. And he said if it extended to 16, it would be Caden Bankier. Is there anyone for you that isn't mentioned in that top 16 we'll extend it to now that you feel got slighted, or a guy that you could make an argument should be in the top 16? Or is that list pretty solid?
No, like especially watching all of these guys this year, I would say that's probably like pretty close to where I'd be aligned. Again, shout out how like Aaron Pionk, how good he's been, like the second half of the college season so far. He's just been so good.
Second half has been very good to both him and Max Plant.
It was very interesting listening to the conversation about Bank here, though, because it's like technically, yes, he just misses out on this, like in the top 15 or whatever, and like if it went to 16, he'd be there. But he's like, but he also said like, do I think you could like take him out of the AHL and like go ask him to play like a role right now in the NHL? Yeah, he probably could do that right now. So like that's where it's always interesting too, where it's like. We talked about putting Huzadinov that high in the pool, like in his rankings, I mean. And it's like you have a question about the upside or whatever, but like he is more than filling a role like fine right now. But then it's also like Bankier misses out on that top 15. But could he play right now in the AHL and like play a couple games? Yeah, he could fill if you're with how fucking injury riddled the Wild are in general. Like it was just interesting to hear him talk about like Bankier that way too. And again, like it's always tough too when he's talking about like the Iowa guys because like that was another thing I laughed at. He's like, I mean, the defense in front of Wallstedt has just been, I mean, not great. It's like, yeah,
could be better.
It's like, yeah, could be significantly better. But like it was always like so he mentioned Caden Bankier. He's like, yeah, hasn't like shown that offensive like totally that offensive pop yet in the AHL. It's like a little bit of context, like. Last year, he misses the first however many games because he got injured in that Mem Cup run for Kamloops. And then he came in, he was like right at like half a point per game, which is like top 5 for Iowa. It's like a half a point per game, guys. Like top 5, 6 points on the team. But the same thing with like Hunter Haight too. Like Hunter Haight's been ridiculously good, despite the fact that he's like just under half a point per game right now in Iowa. So it's always interesting, like listening to like him talk about the guys in Iowa.
Yeah,
knowing it's like there's a level of expectation that you can have for like it's really not a great environment for those prospects in general. Just like they've been so bad.
Yeah, it's tough.
But yeah,
nope, that's fair. Real quick then, before we talk briefly NHL draft and then get into hot takes. 9 Mile Brewing. This past weekend they had their 3rd anniversary. These guys are awesome. Not only will they have a kitchen coming out here in the next couple of weeks, they just got pull tabs in recently, which, Z, I know that's like a weird phenomenon to you, but I promise you, pull tabs are incredible.
I know. I love them. Yeah.
They're awesome. Really good spread of beers, like top to bottom. Like they've got whatever style you need, and our boy John, head brewer, crushes all of them. Just was out there for the anniversary, and they had 2 new beer releases. They had like a coconut oatmeal stout, only like a 6%er, pretty easy drink, delightful. They also had a rye porter, barrel aged, like every little bit you could do, and also delicious, even though I don't really typically like rye beers. And my wife's favorite, the staple there, IPA, Current Obsession. For any of the nerds that listen to Fellowship of the Rink, they literally have like Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. They've got decorations all over. I caught my little 1-year-old like literally looking up, staring and pointing at, it was like Spider-Man fighting the Green Goblin, just hanging from the ceiling. Yep. You know the point, Z. You know the point. But everyone get out to the first and only tap room in Bloomington, 9 Mile Brewing, and be watching out for their events too. The Crokinole tournaments rock. Crokinole is the coolest. Anyone that hasn't played, Krokinole, super fun. Apparently it's a Canadian game. I don't know. That's news to me, but that's what I'm told. We're running with it. Get out there, support our awesome friends over at 9 Mile Brewing. Z,
is it a cool game?
It's cool.
Yeah, it can't be Canadian. It can't be.
Curling's also cool, contrary to belief.
Damn it, that's a good point. All right. Damn it.
Doesn't seem like it either. A lot of people try and argue it's not. I think that
we lose again.
USA won, so they're like, "Oh, it's not cool anymore." Dude, that was I stayed up for that entire thing. It was like 3:30 in the morning when it was over, and I
that's the best.
Over in the other corner of my room, I've got the Matt Hamilton bobblehead. And that guy's a rock star. Even though, sadly, he is the only Wisconsin member of the team. That's a little sad.
We can overlook that.
You know what? Phil Kessel transferred from Wisconsin to Minnesota. Hamilton can do the same. We support it. NHL draft. I just want to real quick, because I didn't get too deep into it because we were running out of time, and Joe shifted us over to Wild Talk. We only got through the top 4, and he basically only mentioned, because him and Corey Proman both have this feeling. You had Caleb Desnoyers at 10, but this was like 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point. Mm-hmm. Do you agree that he's in that top 4, top 5 now, or do you still have any reservations on his game, given that he plays in what Isha will designate the Forgotten League, the QMJHL?
No, I mean, well, first of all, he's for sure going top 10, because he's one player that's like, with how this draft class is starting to shape out now. Again, like right now we've got our like, it was funny listening to him like go through like, yeah, that the top 4 is pretty much right at this point. Yeah, I think everyone has the same top 4. And then him, Proman, and like I think it was Button had Desnoyers.
Proman actually has Desnoyers top 4.
Yeah, he does. And it's like
Proman does now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's it's always funny too, like 6'1.5" center, but like just a really, really reliable 2-way game. He's everywhere that he's played, he's won. Like Moncton and the Q is just, I mean, they eviscerate everybody. Like they like, I mean, almost every game. I think they've lost twice this year, maybe, but like they're easily the best team in the queue. He might be top 3 players in the queue right now too, but he plays such a reliable game. I think at the NHL level, you might have questions about just how high that like upside is as far as like the offensive standpoint. But like when we talked about, or like just somehow linking this to the Wild, like the way coaches talk about someone like Caden Bankier is the same way they talk about Desnoyers, but he's got like more upside than Bankier, obviously. But like he's definitely going top 10 for sure. He's probably going to be close to. He's probably going honestly between 5 and 7. Like you're just getting such certainty with him. The super high floor. He's an incredibly smart player, super reliable, and he's like showed a level of offense this year that we haven't seen before. And like everywhere he plays, he wins. Like not just the cube, like Team Canada too. Whatever team he's on, they win gold. Like, and he's a leader. Like, he's been ridiculously good this year, and he's very fun to watch. So it didn't surprise me at all that like he was like Desnoyers was the guy that he brought up as like someone that could potentially flirt with like
and
right
Roger McQueen, which like, we've said like healthy, he's.
Well, he was in it, when we did the first way too early ranking that we did, he was in like it was.
I think you had him like
plus
6
Frondell
at that point, right?
Yeah, I think I had him. No, because I think I had him. I think I had East Wozniak at 6, which was what a mistake that was.
I mean,
sorry,
we're going to talk about mistakes. Let's talk about Ivan Ryabkin.
Yeah, he's doing real well in the USHL right now, though.
Better.
Yeah, but like we had McQueen there in the top 5 when we did the way too early one in the summer.
Yeah,
he just hasn't played. If he gets back, that's the thing. Like he might not play again for several months, which like that's always.
But it'll still be drafted accordingly.
Yeah.
All right. So your top 10 again. This is 3 or 4 weeks ago, so I'm giving you room to correct. But you had Matthew Schaefer 1, James Haggins, Michael Misa, Porter Martone rounding out your first tier, your top 4. Then you had Jackson Smith, Victor Eklund, Anton Frondell, Roger McQueen, Lyndon Lakovich, and Caleb Desnoyers. Is there anyone right now with what you've watched the past couple weeks that you're like, this guy should absolutely have been in my top 10? Like, who's your one guy that
Carter Bear
snubbed? Carter Bear? Okay. Everett Silvertips, WHL. Talk about him.
Yeah, it's just such a good all-around player. But again, another guy this year that's unlocked this offense that is just like he can score. He sets his teammates up. He like hits everything that moves. And like him on the forecheck is another guy that will just run you through the glass, take the puck, and then either just like set up a scoring chance for someone else, or they've established some offensive zone possession. But like such a good all-around player, and the level of violence that he plays with composure, like not going over the line, taking dumb penalties. He is like, I for whatever reason, I thought I did put him in the top 10. Where did I put him? 11, 12? 13?
You got him 12.
12? Yeah. I probably put him in that top 10 there. And like, again, like I love Frondell.
Do you love him because he's Swedish? Like,
no, I just watched him for so long. I watched him for, I mean, this is like the 4th year where it's just like, he's so fun to watch, but it just might be one of those cases where it's like, he's bigger, more athletic than everyone else. Yeah. And then everyone catches up. I mean, he's still playing really well, especially now in the Allsvenskan. He's put up some points lately, but I probably put Carter Bear in the top 10. Since I didn't, apparently.
No. Reasonable. That brings us then, Z, to our final segment here every week on Fellowship of the Rink. Keyboard Warriors Hot Take segment brought to you by our incredible friends at Barrel Theory Beer Company. And I know we've got a little bit of a lull here now with 4 Nations, and everyone's coming off of their BS with Dry January, but get out and support them in tap room if you can right now. Obviously, once we're back at the X, you know where you can find them. But I'll remind you anyways. Crowler of the Day, Section 105, and Raindrops, delicious flagship IPA on tap, Sections 112, 217, and C36. Z, you had the Crowler of the day when you were out here for that Wild game against Edmonton. What'd you think?
What's above an A+?
A plus plus?
Yes.
A swirly symbol? Star? I don't know.
All the above.
Yeah, I like it. No, Mario. You get the flower that shoots fire. That's what it is. Oh, all right. We're back to Judd's Buds.
We're doing it. Joe's gonna be pissed.
This week's hot takes, again, brought to you by our incredible friends at Barrel Theory Beer Company. First and foremost, Z, my hot take, this is a personal one. Judd Brackett will be making a first-round selection this year.
Okay.
You look at the prospect pool, you hear everything that you and Scott Wheeler have just said about it, and you look at how like clustered it is, right? The age groups within a couple of years, you see where the team's currently at, the transition. There's talk about bringing in Brock Nelson, Brock Besser, anyone named Brock Lesnar maybe, and they are just so deep in their pool. Number 2 per Scott Wheeler. Guerin's going to use some of those pieces to take swings. He's going to know who is part of his perceived future and who's not. I really hope Marco Rossi's not also part of that ammunition, but who knows? But I think something happens to get back into the first round, whether it's done here before the trade deadline or maybe it's a reverse 2024 draft where we basically said we would trade away our pick if our guy wasn't there. Maybe it's this year we tell a couple of teams like, hey, if our guy's there, we'll give you this. And be ready to jump on Judd's guy, right? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I wouldn't. I guess I could see it. I'm just wondering what.
You can tell me I'm dumb.
Well, no, like when you said first round, like when you were like, my immediate reaction was, oh, that means Rossi.
Yeah. I hope not, but
because like I look at like the prospects that they have.
All right, hang on. Hear me out. Literally pick any prospect that they're willing to trade away, which I don't know who Guerin feels that is. Prospect, another pick somewhere, and Ryan Hartman going to a team like Tampa Bay. Like, does that not feel like a possibility? Maybe some retention in there. I don't know. I'm spitballing here, but I feel like Bill Guerin's not going to sit pat and keep this entire prospect pool when they're all clustered together. Almost like, do we worry about becoming the Buffalo Sabres where we just have like a prospect pool that's all clones? And I don't think we have that at all. It's more just like there are redundancies that Bill Guerin sees. Will he trade one or two of those redundancies and try and get back in and give Judd something to give us something even further down the line? Because you got to have it tiered and stacked, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I just like play around with. So I just pulled up their full pool, and it's like, do you go like? Would you lean towards like someone who might be close to like cracking the lineup this year, next year? That's just like there's no room, and realistically, one of the guys they drafted this year, last year, is probably ahead of them. Like at that point, like that would yell to me like Caden Bank here, Rieg Lorenz.
I don't see them being as valuable. Like I think it's gonna be a bigger piece than that moves.
Well, I'm saying I'm just looking at the prospects, like Hunter Haight. Right. I mean, like
I see players like Haight and Height being at the front of that list. Maybe even Ogren. Like I think out of those,
I've been surprised how much trade talk has been come up. Yeah, the Ogren thing has been interesting to me. Where I was just like, I'm surprised how often I hear him come up. I mean, like I get it as far as like whenever I see like fans floating out trade ideas for like big time players or whatever. It's like whatever. They don't have the first round pick now, but like
and part
before
of it
was like first Ogren and then pick your roster player or whatever. Because I mean he's obviously got tremendous value.
Yeah. But also the fact that Guerin has set up the roster in a way that there's not spots. Like, there are 3 spots open, and both all of Huznadinov, Rossi, Ogren need to be factored into those 3 openings. It's like, I could see him being moved just because they're not in a spot where like timing doesn't line up. I don't know. I don't want him gone. I'm not advocating for it. I can see it. I don't know.
That's where I was going with that. Was just like, I was surprised how many, like whenever, like whatever, whether it's like a Russo mailbag or what, like just people throwing out trade ideas in general, how many people would throw Ogren into that mix? Like,
I don't like it.
Not with much backlash at all. That was like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, I could see it because he does have a ton of value.
NHL yet. A lot of fans don't even know.
Yeah.
Right? His hair, though, immaculate.
Unbelievable hair.
No, they all want him gone because they heard that he likes Marcus Johansson. That's all it is.
He's his friend, man.
It's that simple.
Buddy,
This one's going to be really quick, but producer of Judd's Buds and super fan of Fellowship of the Rink, Mateo, he says, hot take, it should be NHL or NCAA for height next year. No more WHL. I mean, that's a very, very lukewarm, cold take, don't you think? Is there any world where you see him back in the WHL next year? Is it even an option?
No, there's not really a point in going back.
And at this point, since he can go, I feel like it's AHL, NHL, wherever he lands. I would, again, if he played for the Gophers.
Well, I guess that's what he's saying. Don't send him to the A? Or what he said. I guess
that's fair. Okay, he says NHL or NCAA, no A. All right, Mateo. I can. That's hot. I guess that's lukewarm, kind of warm. He'll be in the AHL, but I respect the hotness of the take now. I guess
I also think the AHL would be better than him going to the NCAA, anyways. Like if he was to somehow transfer to the college
Gophers, I disagree.
Never mind. That's a great fit. It's actually the best pit. That's the best place he could possibly go play.
Especially if Matthew Wood goes back. All right, moving on. This one will be quick, but a hot take on. I guess we got 2 Four Nations hot takes here. First one, Quinn Hughes' injury is a positive.
That's insane.
Because Four Nations doesn't mean shit, like we've talked about on Judd's Buds and just in general off camera. And I like Jake Sanderson, even if he's the number 7 guy, getting in and getting a taste, because he's a guy that by the time we get to the Olympics, he could be a top 6 guy. And I like him being included in the mix when we know Quinn Hughes is going to be part of that mix. And who cares about Four Nations? That's the stance. Go.
Yeah, when you put it so, like, it's more of a there's this bright side versus no, this is great. I mean, to be honest with you, I would have just rather have him make it in the first place over Hanifin. So there you go.
So there's all right. Spoke Z hot take.
Yeah.
Hanifin shouldn't be on the team. He's a bum, especially because he plays with that minivan douchebag.
Probably friends with the minivan man.
Dude, he probably bought a minivan and he didn't have a choice. He didn't want it.
Sick.
He was just told, he's like, dude, if you want to be here, you better get one.
He makes me sick.
Here's the other one, and I'm bummed because Jeff Merrick kind of cucked this one from me, even though I've been sitting on it. He said it for Canada, but I'm going to say it for Team USA. Team USA should sandbag the Four Nations. They should go full 1980 miracle and let everyone beat the crap out of them when they're expected to be the juggernaut right now, so they can come in the Olympics and be the overlooked underdog. I mean, because Four Nations doesn't matter. Again, no, Four Nations, I emphasize Four Nations is bullshit.
I'd be down for that if that meant that we were getting like very fun youth movement roster.
Right.
But here's the thing. It is asinine for anyone. More. It's asinine for anyone to suggest that like Canada's on a different level than the United States in general in hockey.
Like on a lower level?
No, that's not asinine.
That's my
actually
point.
reasonable.
No, that's my point. Canada is not the no. My point is USA is the team to beat, and I want to erase that narrative going into the Olympics, which is what matters. And here's Cole chiming in because we are live here at the end of Judd's Buds. Hot take: Russia would. I'm going to say we're going to insert the word win. Russia would win this 4 nations tournament if they were in it as a 5 nations face-off.
We can ad-lib since he left that win. We can ad-lib.
Yeah. Also, the fact that
Russia would lose
honestly,
every game of this 4 nations.
No. Russia, every game you would smash the over.
Yeah, dude.
Smash the over. It's going to be a 7-6 game every time. It's happening. It's going to be. We know it. Their defense sucks. Even though their goaltending is awesome, like their 3 goalies might be better than the 3 U.S. goalies, but their blue line is so bad. Their team is all offense, no defense. It would be an absolute boat race, and it would be so fun. But, yeah, we're not going to have Russia back anytime soon, sadly. Z, my last one here. The headline of it is, the Carolina Hurricanes were not the winner of the Mikko Rantanen trade.
Oh, well, actually, I'm glad.
Do you want to hear the follow-up?
Yes.
Colorado Avalanche technically weren't either. Martin Necas was the winner of the Mikko Rantanen trade because that boy is going off. Him and Nathan McKinnon erased, deleted, does not care about Mikko Rantanen's phone number anymore. He loves Marty Necas, and I think both teams, like, it's a reasonable trade. I think you can still argue that Avalanche could have and should have gotten more, and that the Carolina Hurricanes got an incredible player, even though things haven't been great early on. Marty Necas is living his absolute best life. He's going to make a good amount of money. He's probably going to sign for like 9 or 10 mil and just be happy living in Colorado and playing with Nathan McKinnon. He wins this trade.
Yes, he does. Again, especially assuming he stays. But like, again, when we talked about this trade on, I keep forgetting this is Fellowship now. When we talked about this on Judd's Buds, like, I kept saying, like, the big reason I was like, yeah, I thought Rantanen would have got more as far as like picks or whatever or something like that. But like, I am so high on Marty Necas, and just watching him those first few games, it was insane. And then this week, every game that he's played in so far with Colorado, like,
good for him.
He has like the last couple of years, he's obviously taken several steps forward, but like the fact that he stepped in first shift in Colorado and like looked like he got even better, that power play with him on it. Oh my God. Because the thing with him is he's obviously an incredible skater. And that's the thing that's fascinating is like watching him and McKinnon play together. They both can fly with the puck, where it's just like, okay, like we were already like scared of playing Colorado because they can play like cocaine hockey, where it's just like 1,000 miles an hour up and down the ice. And by the way, they have like the best forward in the league playing defense in Cale Makar. It's like unbelievable to watch. But like, Necas is signed for, I forget what he's making this year and next year, and he's not going to be making 14-15 million like Rantanen in the first place.
No, totally. And
that's why it's like this is a more than reasonable. Like getting Marty Necas as a return is a huge.
It's
piece.
Great, but also he's seen the other side. Like anyone that wants to say like, oh man, did Carolina mess up? Like, the relationship was burned. He wasn't going to be there long term. They did the bridge for a reason to get a deal like this, and he's seen that the grass can be very green where he's at and less green elsewhere. And he'd be crazy to not take a reasonable bargain, like somewhere in that, like, again, 9-10 mil range if he keeps on doing what he's doing, to stay and play with McKinnon, be in a place where he's wanted and happy. I think it works out well for him and the Avalanche, unless he just gets super greedy and says, I'll just take whatever the highest bidder is. And in that case, he deserves it when it goes poorly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fine. And the thing with what's interesting too, like with Rantanen is like, it's fascinating hearing how many people, not just like whatever, like the Twitter bullshit nonsense, but like people that are plugged in are like, no, like there is legit zero guarantee that Rantanen does re-sign in Carolina. But like, if he, especially if they know that he's probably not going to re-sign there, how fucking nervous are they going to be this whole tournament now that he's playing? Like he's 50-50 whether or not he's healthy, good to go for Team Finland right now. And then the Finnish coach is like, oh, he's playing Thursday. He's fine. Like if you're Carolina, you gotta be like, oh God, oh no. They're gonna be freaking out because like he's been like he's had a knock for a little bit here, and like it sounded like there was a real chance he was just not gonna play in this tournament because he was hurt.
But it's also funny
the
though.
Finnish coach was like, no, he's good.
But it's also funny because they had to have thought like, oh yeah, him going and playing in this tournament with Aho, that gives us a little chance to like nuzzle in nice and good.
Well, they're best friends already anyways.
They're best friends already. He already lost Nathan McKinnon's phone number. Like it's all done. No, it'll be interesting. But all right, well, that's a good roundup of hot takes. Again, brought to you by our incredible friends, Barrel Theory Beer Company. Go out to East 7th. They're absolutely worth the stop, whether you're out there for Minnesota Wild games or just out there for good beer. Z, we did it. We got through it. We did the thing. And should give a shout out everyone that wants more prospect talk, whether that's Minnesota Wild prospects or NHL draft. Please subscribe to the Judd's Buds podcast feed, or just check out everything we do on the Soda Pod YouTube channel. But also give some love to our friends MNCAA. Every Monday we drop Gopher Hockey Talk with our boys Drew Cove and of course Nate Gopher State. But also Thursday we've got Max Veach, who is very, very rational and calm about how UMD is doing. And our boy Nick Maxon covering St. Cloud. Then we've got Isha, producer of this show, and Brett Marshall doing a analytics-focused show, Wildly Informed, also on the Soda Pod podcast feed. And you all know where to find Fellowship of the Rink. All good. Love you guys. Appreciate you listening. Joe's not back next week. I'll try and find someone else so I don't have to drag Spoked Z through this again. But we'll catch you next week. I don't have much else to say. Appreciate you.